let me give you one example of why Mr. Musial is the consummate sportsman. Back in the early 70s, when I owned Bill Rose Tavern, Billy Rose over in Alton, the Anheuser-Busch distributor there, Bob Dixon, the Dixon family were good friends of mine, of course, because I sold a lot of their product. And so back in those days, they had a businessman special, 12:15 on Wednesday, which I see a lot of the games this year are scheduled at 12:15. So Bob calls me, he said, listen, he said, be out here next Wednesday. We're going to go to the ball game. They're going to bring Mr. Bush's bus over, and we're going to ride over on that. So those were in my drinking days. I haven't had a drink in about 25 years, but I'll sell you all night long. So I got out to the warehouse about 9 o'clock, and we started drinking Mr. Bush's finest, a little Michelob. And so here comes the bus, and a big Prevost bus, private bus, of course, and Bill Cross from the brewery was on it, and two guys, one guy driving, they had a horn. You hit the horn, it goes ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and he's serving beer and peanuts and all that. So Cincinnati's playing that day, and for you kids, you won't remember this, but they had a guy by the name of Don Gullett who could throw the ball almost as hard and as fast as Bob Gibson. And so they were pitching Gullett that day against Gibson, and we had, of course, those were in the days, you have to remember, fans, the Cardinals used to draw 12, 13,000 people back in the 70s before Whitey. And so I'm sitting right behind the home plate, and the game's starting, and Bill Cross from the brewery said, let's go up to Mr. Bush's private box, the Redbird Roost. I said, I want to watch the game. He said, no problem. You can sit outside up there and watch it. So we go up, and I get a hamburger and a beer, and I'm sitting out there, and nobody else out there but me and Gibson and Gullett. And I said to myself, man, these guys are throwing some heat today. And the voice behind me says, yeah, they're on it. And I recognize the voice, and it's the man, it's Mr. Musial. And I turned around, and he stuck his hand out, and he said, I'm Stan. I said, I know who you are. And he said, what are you doing here in Mr. Bush's box? And I said, well, I rode over on his bus. And what I didn't tell you guys was when I was riding over on his bus, there was a red phone. Now, this was before cell phones or what have you. This was in the 70s. So I asked Bill Cross, I said, what is that phone? He said, that's Mr. Bush's private phone. You can call any place in the world. I said, can I call my dad? He's a hell of a Cardinal fan. And he said, sure. So it's about 11:30, and Dad happened to be in the house at that time, and I got him on the phone, and he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm on August Bush's Bush on the way to the ballpark. He said, you mean you're on August Bush's? I said, yeah, I've had a couple of beers. He said, be careful. And so we talked, and so to bring it back to speed, we go up to the Redbird Roost, and I get the ball, and I go out, and I'm sitting down, and Mr. Musial shakes my hand. He said, what are you doing here? I said, well, I rode over on Mr. Bush's bus. And he said, well, that's quite a ride, isn't it? And I said, it sure was. And I said, I even called my dad. And he said, oh, he said, see a Cardinal fan? I said, the biggest, man. And so no more was said. And about the second inning, it's about 1 o'clock. And I get a tap on his shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Mr. Musial. He said, let's go call your dad.
Oh.
I said, Mr. Musial, I don't want to. He said, don't worry, there's a payphone right outside. He said, let's go call him. So we get out there, and I call, and I get Dad on the phone. He's still on a payphone. You know, I put the change on. I thought maybe the man might loan me the money. But anyway, I put it in, and so he says, what's his name? And I says, Charles. And he gets on the phone. He says, hey, Charlie. He said, I'm sorry, I get a little emotional. He says, hey, Charlie. He said, this is Stan the Man. We're here at the ball game. I'm with Billy. I just want to tell you hi. He talked to my dad for 2 or 3 minutes. Seemed like an eternity to me. Got off the phone, and I said, Mr. Musial, I can't thank you enough. And he said, no problem. They told that story at my dad's funeral. So when Mr. Musial died, I went to his funeral.